Today is Unit 1, Day 2. So you'll scroll into our Unit 1 module. You'll scroll down just a little bit to get to Unit 1, Day 2. 4 questions, should be plenty of time to complete them. Go ahead and knock it out. right, so hopefully that was ample time to complete the warm-up. And as I've repeated a few times in the first week of class, if you did show up after 5 minutes, so after 10:25, then please do send a message to the chat so that I can correct my attendance. I have already taken attendance, so I want to make sure that if you showed up a little bit late, I can still include you. So please do send a message to the chat if you know you showed up late. I see we've got a few people who probably did. Today's objectives are twofold. Thank you, Gloria. We've got two objectives. Number one, biologists will be able to compare and contrast the two energy-producing organic compounds, carbohydrates and lipids. So we're focused today specifically on carbohydrates and lipids, and that is indeed the title of today's lesson. The second objective is to relate the structure of carbohydrates and lipids to the survival of living organisms. So we want to always come back to this question of how does this contribute to living organisms and their survival? So we want to make this very practical. What is the role? What's the function of carbs and lipids for the survival of living organisms? And then the essential question. Would anyone like to read the essential question while I go ahead and fix the attendance for Gloria and Brian? Thank you both.
Essential question: what are the important similarity? I can't say the word.
Yep,
And
we got it.
differences between carbohydrates and lipids.
Excellent, thank you. So what are the most important differences and similarities between carbs and lipids? We're going to discuss that today. At the beginning of every lesson, I do encourage you all to write down the dates as well as the title of the lesson. So we've got carbohydrates and lipids, and today is January 13th, 2021. Almost 2 weeks into the year. Isn't that hard to believe? I'll leave this up for a few seconds. If you're really trying to be organized, maybe you'll also consider writing down a quick summary of the objectives or the essential question as well. Okay. So yesterday we introduced a couple of terms. We talked about organic compounds. We talked about biomolecules. We called them biological macromolecules. There were all those terms that were referring to the same four things. We had carbohydrates, we had lipids, we had proteins, and we had nucleic acids. We refer to these as organic compounds because they have carbon-hydrogen bonds. So you may have heard of propane, like propane tanks or a propane grill. Propane is a specific type of gas that we can use as a source of energy to heat things up. And this is what it looks like in a 3D model. We've got 3 carbon atoms with hydrogen atoms bonded to them. So you can see these yellow carbon-hydrogen bonds. They are bonds that connect hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms. Inorganic compounds are compounds or molecules that do not have carbon-hydrogen bonds. So either they don't have carbon, as is the case in water. Water is just H2O, so there's no carbon in water. Or they don't have hydrogen, like carbon dioxide, which is CO2. It does not have hydrogen. Or it doesn't have either one of them, like salt, which is NaCl, sodium chloride. But when we see both carbon and hydrogen present in a molecule, as we see here with propane, more than likely carbon is bonded to hydrogen, which would make it an organic compound. Now, inorganic compounds, as we can see, are still really important to life. We need oxygen in order to do respiration, to make energy, 78% of the atmosphere, 78% of the air that's outside is nitrogen. Trees and plants and organisms that do photosynthesis need carbon dioxide. We all need water. All living things need water. Okay, so these are compounds that are still extremely important to life on planet Earth, but they're considered inorganic because they don't have these carbon-hydrogen bonds. Yesterday, we also, and over the last week or so, again, if you're showing up a little bit late, please do make sure you send a message to the chat so that I can get my attendance corrected. I see we had 20 people, now we've got 21, so I know someone showed up. Please do send a message to the chat. We also talked about last week prefixes and suffixes, which were root words that we can use to kind of break down large words that we don't know the meaning of. One of those prefixes was the prefix mono, M-O-N-O. And mono means one or something that is singular. In contrast to that, there's a prefix poly, which means many or plural, something that comes in multiples. This is extremely relevant to this first unit and to our first few lessons, as we talk about these organic compounds, because each of our four organic compounds is made up of a specific monomer. The organic compounds themselves are polymers. So monomers are singular. We call them building blocks. They're like individual Lego pieces. They're not connected to one another. They're just independent. Polymers are made up of at least two, but usually hundreds of monomers. Okay, in reality, most of these organic compounds are chains of many, many dozens of monomers. So a polymer is made up of at least two monomers. In this case, we've got a polymer of 1, 2, 3 monomers. In this case, we've got a polymer of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monomers. And again, each of our four organic molecules are considered polymers, and they're each made up of their own specific monomer. Now, this is something that I do want you all to write down, which you see on the top and on the bottom. This is something we're going to continue to come back to. This is probably one of the most important central themes of biology. The shape and orientation of the monomers matters. The structure of something, meaning how it's shaped, determines its function, meaning what it does. That means that if I change the structure, even in a small way, oftentimes I will have extremely big impacts on the function. If I change the shape of something, then I change what that thing is able to do. Okay, so here in this image, we can see each of our four biomolecules, each of our four polymers, and we can also see their monomers as well. Okay, we'll talk more about them today. We'll talk about these middle two, carbohydrates and lipids. So this is extremely important stuff that I want you all to write down. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for a long time. If you know you're a slow writer or you just want to be able to take some more time to process it, great idea to take a screenshot or take a picture of what you're seeing on your screen. This is going to be extremely helpful to you as we go through the course. So the function of a carbohydrate is to provide quick energy, energy that you're not planning on using next week. You're not planning on using it even tomorrow. You're hoping to use this energy right away. So I like to think about carbohydrates as being sugars. In fact, most of the examples of carbohydrates are sugars. So that allows me to make the connection to a sugar rush. If you've ever had, maybe you've got a little sibling, or maybe you yourself have experienced this. You eat a large bag of candy, or you eat a lot of candy on Halloween or some other day of the year. For about an hour or two after that, you're very jittery. You have a lot of energy. You're bouncing up and down. You're shaking your leg a little bit. Your mind is all over the place. You're having a sugar rush because your body has been flooded by those carbohydrates and is trying to use some of that energy, as much of that energy as possible. Whatever energy cannot be used typically within those first 24 hours is going to be stored. And it will be stored as fats. It will be stored as lipids. Okay, we'll talk about lipids in a few slides. But carbohydrates are meant to provide quick energy. That's their function. An additional function is that they make up the cell walls of plant cells. That is going to be something we talk a lot more about in Unit 2, but I want you guys to have that idea in your heads already. Carbs make up the cell walls of plant cells. The monomer, aka the building block, aka the subunit of a carbohydrate, is called a monosaccharide. Mono means one, and sac means sugar. Monosaccharide, therefore, means one sugar. So here's a picture of a monomer for monosaccharide. Another word for monosaccharide is glucose as well. So you'll hear me refer to it as glucose. But here's a picture. It's a hexagon, so a six-sided figure. And on each corner of this is a carbon atom. It's called glucose. And lastly, the atoms that are present in a carbohydrate are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And they appear in a 1:2:1 ratio. They appear in a 1:2:1 ratio. So I'm going to leave this up. I'm going to stop talking for about 90 seconds as you all write down as much from this screen as you can. And then I have a question for you. So let's take 90 seconds to try to get as many notes as possible. Okay, so that was 90 seconds. Now my question is, pay attention to this 1:2 to 1 ratio. That means that if I have one carbon atom, I'm going to have two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, meaning there will always be the same number of oxygens as there are carbons, and there will always be twice that number of hydrogens. So let's think about this. If I have 3 carbon atoms in a carbohydrate, I have 3 carbon atoms. How many oxygens should I have? You can send a message to the chat or you can unmute yourself. But the question is, if I have 3 carbon atoms, then how many oxygen atoms should I have in a carbohydrate? Okay, Jason says 6. Anybody else want to throw an answer in there? If I have, we've got a 1:2 to 1 ratio. If I've got 3 carbons, how many oxygens should I have? We'll ask about hydrogens next. Okay. Okay, so Jason changed and said 4. Kathy says 3. Let's talk about it. So if I've got 3 carbon atoms, I should also have 3 oxygen atoms. So Kathy, you're right. But Jason, I think you were thinking about 6 hydrogen atoms. The reason for this is, like I said, in a carbohydrate, we will always have this 1:2 to 1 ratio. That tells you that I'll always have the same number of carbons as I do oxygens. If I have 3 carbons, then I've got 3 oxygens. If I've got 12 carbons, I've got 12 oxygens. If I have 52 carbons, then I have 52 oxygens. Because of the 1:2 to 1 ratio, I will always have twice that number of hydrogens. So if I have 3 carbons and 3 oxygens, I need to have twice that amount of hydrogens. I'll have 6 hydrogens. If I've got 12 carbons and 12 oxygens, then I need to have 24 hydrogens. If I've got 52 carbons and 52 oxygens, then I need to have 104 hydrogens. There will always be twice as many. Okay. And then lastly, I do encourage you all again, I think visualization is great. And we're going to practice with that simple math a little bit more tomorrow. But I think visualization is great. So if you drew the picture of the monomer, that's excellent. I would also encourage you to draw a picture of a polymer, just to give yourself a cue, an idea of what's happening here, a hint about what's happening. If a monomer is just one of these 6 carbon rings, just one glucose, then a polymer is going to be several of these 6 carbon rings linked to get together in a chain. So several glucose molecules linked together in a chain. Okay. So here are some common examples of carbohydrates. We've got glucose. Glucose is the monomer of a carbohydrate. So glucose and monosaccharide, those mean the same thing for the most part. Starch is a carbohydrate as well. Starch is something that appears in most photosynthetic organisms, most plants. Glycogen is a polysaccharide that appears in animals. And cellulose is an important polysaccharide that appears in both plants and in insects, believe it or not. So please do write down the examples. One other thing that I think is extremely important for you all to note, that's why I have it typed in red here. Most sugars end in OSE. So glucose, because it ends in OSE, we should automatically be thinking, oh, that's a sugar, that's a carbohydrate. And that tells you information about it. That tells you, number one, its function is to provide quick energy. We can also even think further. It has the atoms carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So this is how we want to start making connections. This is how we should start envisioning things in a mind map. So ends in OSE, that should tell us that's a sugar. We've also got fructose, that ends in OSE, so it must be a sugar. You may have heard of sucrose, that ends in OSE, must be a sugar. Lactose, some people are lactose intolerant. Lactose is a sugar that appears specifically in milk. It ends in OSE, it must be a sugar. All right, so we want to get good at stuff like that. Just make it easier on yourself. Find those small hints. If it ends in OSE, well, then it must be a carbohydrate. It must be a sugar. Cellulose must be a sugar. Okay, make sure you have these examples written down, please. Yes, glucose is the most common monosaccharide. Oops. Okay. Going too far. All right, so let's test out our knowledge a little bit here. So keep in mind, one sugar, that's a monosaccharide. Mono means one. So in this case, I've got one ring. So of course, that's a monosaccharide. How many do I have here? How many different rings do I have?
Can you go back up? I didn't read the last part. Okay, okay.
All right. So I've got one carbon ring here. So that's a monosaccharide. Mono means one. How many rings do I have here?
Two.
Thank you, Kathy. So this, we need a prefix that means two. Does anybody know of a prefix that means two? Di, D-I. You all, I'm sure also, we talked about the prefix bi, as in a bicycle. Both bi and di can mean two. So two rings is a disaccharide. This one is called sucrose. And then down here, we've got four of them. We could call that maybe tetra. Tetra is a prefix meaning four. But we're just more generally going to call this a polysaccharide because it has many. And this one is amylose. Okay. So a practice question. We want to think about some of our test taking strategies in preparation for some of the exams that we'll take, and also in preparation for the big exam at the end of the course, the EOC exam. When you are looking at a multiple choice question, before you even look at the answer choices, you want to make sure you understand what the question is asking. I think the number one mistake students make is that they look at the answer choices too soon. And some of the questions that are asked are long, and they include new words, and they ask about specific species of animals. And so you just get confused. And you start looking at the answer choices before you're about what you're being asked. So the first thing you need to do when you're looking at a multiple choice question is identify key terms in the question. Identify the key terms. Identify terms that you know already and start to brainstorm around those terms. And if you see a term that you know, you're like, okay, I should be thinking about this. I can make a connection to this. I want to be aware of this before I look at the answer choices. And sometimes it's good to get that information out of your head. And we call it in biology doing a brain dump. A brain dump. So you've identified a key term in this question, which says, which of the following correctly describes a carbohydrate? The key term is obviously carbohydrate here. So in your brain dump, you might want to write down as much information as you can think about as it relates to carbohydrates. All right, so I see key term carbohydrate. I know carbohydrates provide quick energy. Let me write that down, quick energy. They're also present in the cell walls of plants. So maybe I should write cell walls. I know that they also have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1:2:1 ratio. Maybe I should write that down as well. So in your brain dump, you're just getting out information that might help you make a prediction about the answer. Once you've done that, of course, you need to go back and reread the question. You don't want to get so jumbled up that you have totally forgotten what the question was even asking. You reread the question and then you pick the best answer. All right, so again, which of the following correctly describes a carbohydrate? We're thinking about carbohydrates. That's the key term here. Now we're in a good place. We haven't even looked at the answer choices, but we're thinking in the right direction. Answer choice A says a macromolecule that is made up of quick energy and cell structures and gives the body monosaccharides. I see some terms there that appear in my brain dump. I see quick energy, I see cell structure, I even see monosaccharide, which is something that I didn't write in my brain dump, but it is a related term. But when I really look at this answer choice and the way it's written, it says that it's a macromolecule that is made up of quick energy. That's not true. We know that it provides quick energy, but it's not made up of quick energy. So the process of elimination, we're going to cross that out. That can't be right. Then I want to move on. Answer choice B, a macromolecule that is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 2:1:1 ratio. That sounds familiar, but we know that the ratio we've discussed is 1:2:1, not 2:1:1. So something small there could have potentially led you to selecting the wrong answer choice. But this is an incorrect ratio. This is not correct. So we're going to cross that one out too. Answer choice C, a macromolecule that is made up of monosaccharides and gives the body quick energy as well as cell structures. Okay, so this looks a lot like A. It's very similar to A, but we've switched some of the wording around. This time, instead of being made up of quick energy and cell structures, answer choice C says that it's made up of monosaccharides. And instead of giving the body monosaccharides, answer choice C says giving the body quick energy and cell structure. That sounds a lot more like what we're looking for. That's what my brain dump looks like. So C is a strong answer choice, but we don't want to ever answer something unless we're running out of time. We don't want to answer something without looking at the fourth answer choice. D, a macromolecule that is responsible for creating long-term energy for our cells and bodies. No, so long-term, that's incorrect. We've only talked about quick term or short-term, quick energy. So C is the best answer in this case. That's what we want you all to start practicing when you're looking at these multiple choice questions. Have a piece of scratch paper next to you and start writing down your brain dumps. You never know what kind of information might be useful to you later on in the test. If you can write it down in the first few questions, but then it comes up again on question number 40, well, you still have it. You still have access to it. Even though you've seen all these other answers and all these other questions, and you might be jumbled, your head is now tired a little bit, you still have your brain dump to lean on. So a brain dump is extremely, extremely important. All right, lipids. I know we're starting to encroach upon the asynchronous portion of class. We're almost done. Lipids are the second energy producing polymer. They're the second energy producing compound. But the difference is that instead of providing short-term energy, lipids provide long-term energy as well as insulation. And instead of making up cell walls, they make up cell membranes. A lipid is made up of an odd monomer, but we can just kind of we just say a glycerol backbone and 3 fatty acid tails. So it looks like the letter E, a capital E. We've got this blue backbone that's made up of a compound called glycerol. And then we've got 3 fatty acid tails. So it looks kind of like this, with these 3 fatty acid tails that are pink in this depiction. And it has the same atoms as carbohydrates, but notice something. There is no 1:2:1 ratio. So in a carbohydrate, if I have 5 carbons, then I'm definitely going to have 5 oxygens, and I'm definitely going to have 10 hydrogens. But in a lipid, I might have 5 carbons and 6 oxygens and 12 hydrogens. The numbers don't necessarily have to be in a ratio of 1:2:1. And we can see the polymer here. It's the same structure, but it's repeated several times. They're linked together in a chain. So again, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to leave this on the screen for folks to finish writing or to take a picture or a screenshot. Okay. Here are common examples of lipids. So we've got fats, like the ones that appear in butter or in different oils that you might use to cook with. Waxes, beeswax, earwax, candle wax, these are lipids as well. Phospholipids, we're going to talk a lot more about phospholipids in Unit 2. They are extremely important because they make up all cell membranes. And steroids as well. Steroids are lipids. One thing that's extremely important as well is that lipids are insoluble in water. That means that they do not dissolve in water. So you've heard the term, and probably even seen this, but we've heard the term that oil and water don't mix. Okay, so you cannot mix, even no matter how hard you stir, no matter how high you heat it up, the oil is not going to dissolve into water. They're not going to mix. You're going to end up with bubbles of oil suspended in the water. The reason for this is that lipids are what we call non-polar, and water is polar. You'll learn more about that in chemistry, but basically the two just don't like each other. Lipids are non-polar, water is polar, so they don't get along. Okay. Okay, so here's another representation of lipids as well. This is really what it chemically looks like. You can see how many carbons make up these fatty acid tails. It's a long chain of carbons. It's not short, they're very long. But we don't need to focus on that. And here's what fat looks like in the human body. This is called adipose tissue. So this person is getting some type of surgery done on their lower leg. And we can see the amount of fat that's present there. Now, some fat is good for our bodies. We need to have some fat tissue present. Why do you think that is? Why is some fat good for our bodies? What does it do? Again, we want to come back to that essential question. How do carbohydrates and lipids contribute to the survival of living organisms? So what does a fat do for our survival? How does it protect us? Any ideas? How do fats help us to survive? Think about a walrus or a polar bear. What do they have? Or a whale even, what do they have that protects them? They've got really thick skin, and they've also got a special kind of skin, which has a lot of fat in it. It starts with a B, the letter B. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like a shield. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good answer. So it insulates you, or it keeps the heat in, and it also protects you from the environment, outside of your body. So when you're in a really cold environment, you've got fat to protect you. And of course, the organs that are in our torsos need protection. So we have a lot of layers that protect us. We've got some skin, we've got muscle, but we also have a lot of fat as well. And that fat is a good thing to a certain degree. Okay, I guess I kind of just answered this. I don't want to spend as much time on this question, but you all can send your answer choices to the chat. The question is, polar bears have a plethora of lipids. That means they have a lot of lipids. Why is this beneficial to them? A, they provide quick energy for the polar bear to use while hunting food. B, they provide insulation and warmth for the polar bear as they live in colder temperatures. C, they give the polar bear additional energy to be able to hunt for food. D, they determine how many mates the polar bear will be able to attract. All right, so we've got a couple of people saying B in the chat. I'll give it a few more seconds to see if anybody else wants to throw an answer in there. Okay, so Brianna and Said, you all are both correct. B is the best answer here. All right, we also could think about, and Rudy, thank you, I appreciate you throwing in your answer also. We can also think about the fact that bears hibernate as well. So, and squirrels, we can think maybe you've seen a fat squirrel at the end of the summer or towards the fall. They're getting themselves fat so that over a long period of time, they've got access to some energy, right? Carbohydrates provide quick energy that you want to use in the next 24 hours. Lipids provide energy that you can use for a long period of time, that your body will slowly break down that fat to give it access to some energy. So while squirrels and bears and some other animals are hibernating and they're not actually eating anything, or elephant seals, yeah, they're not eating anything, their body still needs to have some access to, I still don't know how to pronounce your name. If you can come off of mute and tell me how to pronounce it, that would be really helpful.
My name is Sade, and I know say.
Okay, Sade, I did ask you in the first week, but you didn't say anything. So that's good to know. I appreciate you. Sade, thank you. All right. So in any case, having that access to fat provides a long-term energy source. Okay. So the asynchronous assignment, we've got 20 minutes left. You should be able to do it in 20 minutes. It looks a lot like this. What I'm going to ask you all to do is to compare and contrast the two organic molecules that we discussed today, carbohydrates and lipids. Carbs, of course, look like this six-sided figure, a hexagon, and lipids look like a capital E. What you're going to do is come up with 4 facts for each. So 4 facts for carbohydrates and 4 facts for lipids, and then come up with 2 additional facts that they have in common. So 2 similarities. The assignment on Canvas is called U1D2, carbohydrates versus lipids. And the exact instructions are explained on Canvas, but what I want you all to do, you'll make a copy of the assignment, you'll save it into your Google folder, and you'll also submit it to Canvas. Okay, so if you need help doing that, don't hesitate to let me know. We've got 20 minutes left. Go ahead and knock it out so you can stay on task and stay on track with the rest of the class. Jason, is this the one you're looking for? I'm not exactly sure which one you're looking for.
Are they like Google Slides?
Yes, they should be Google Slides.
Okay.
Go to the previous one. Jason, I'm still not sure which one you're talking about. Second one, I'm not sure what you mean. I think this is the second one that you saw today. And yes, Shadi, I'll go to the carbs one next. So this is the third one. This is the fourth one. Okay. Okay. And then Shadi, I think this is the one you're looking for. The one before this one. Okay. Glad to know you all are taking notes. Let's keep it up for the rest of the semester. Okay, folks, so it is now 11:35, so you all should go ahead and enjoy your 30-minute lunch break. I appreciate the participation today. If you need any help with the asynchronous assignment, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Kadaria, are you asleep?